My name is Ken Parker. We're here in my workshop in Gloucester, Massachusetts. I'm a 50-year veteran, I guess, as a guitar maker. And it's where I do my thing. My father was a pretty good violin player, and my mom played piano pretty well. And on Saturdays, they used to play duets in our living room. And that was something that fascinated me. They clearly had a blast doing it. I mean, they were giggling and working together, and it was a beautiful set of memories of watching the two of them make music together. In my home, everybody seemed to be able to make everything that we needed. My dad was pretty good with a saw and a hand plane, and my mom was a pretty good dressmaker. And I would say that my mother, Grace, was responsible for my first understanding of how a project takes shape and how it moves ahead. Have a look at this, huh? This is Walnut from Pennsylvania. I was one of those kids that took everything apart and put it back together. First guitar-esque project was I made a guitar out of a stick of wood and some corrugated cardboard, which didn't work because I didn't know enough about corrugated cardboard at the time. But I think now I could probably use that same pile of materials and build an instrument, but I was pretty bummed out that it wouldn't hold strings. When I lived in Rochester, New York in the early 70s, I was able to get a job with my favorite woodworker, Richard Scott Newman, a brilliant furniture maker. He did things with wood that I didn't understand and wanted to understand. So I spent a couple of years trying to figure out how to qualify to get a job with him, which I finally was able to do. And that's when I built my first musical instrument. I built a 4-string fretless bass for my brother Alan. I learned a lot from that. But I started out at the music store. Don't touch that, kid. So here I am looking at the Fender basses on the wall like this, my hands behind my back. And my conclusion was, well, it's just a couple pieces of wood and a couple pieces of metal. How hard can this be? And then it wasn't until I tried my hand at building them that I discovered that it actually is quite a complicated thing. When I was 21, I took lessons with a jazz player in Rochester, New York. His name was Dick Longale. I was fascinated with his Gibson L12. I couldn't believe how great it sounded. And the rest of us were turning our knobs or changing our strings, trying to figure out how to sound as good as Dick, and we just couldn't. And so I looked and looked and looked. After our lessons, I looked inside with a flashlight, trying to figure out what I was looking at. And then I went and tried to find my own archtop guitar. And I played all the ones that I could get my hands on, and none of them were anywhere near as good as the one he had. Early 40s Gibson L12 without a cutaway. Sounded fantastic. Big, beautiful, round, low end, clear and distinct, nice note separation, beautiful trebles. It was a great guitar. So I decided if I couldn't find a good one, maybe I would just have to make one. And so that year I started my first archtop guitar. So I was turned on by how great a particular archtop sounded. And then I quickly discovered that that particular archtop was an outlier. It was an exceptional instrument. And it made me wonder, why can't they all sound this good? So in a lot of ways, that's been my vector ever since then. Trying to figure out why couldn't they all sound that good, or maybe a little better. It was pretty obvious that guitars were not anything like unified quality, that there was a big variation between a good one and one that you didn't want. And it seemed to me that wasn't really fair to guitar players. One of the things I wanted to do at Parker Guitars was ensure that we delivered a high-quality product that didn't need repair and would hang in there and serve the musician as a dependable piece of gear. One of the things that I'd found was a continuing problem in wooden guitars is that they tend to deform and bend somewhere around here. The wood is loaded with the tensile force of all the strings, which adds up to amount of force that an adult human weighs, or something like that. And that's quite a lot of force for a little piece of wood to sustain year after decade. So this is where composite material comes in, and I added it to wood as an ingredient to help the wood withstand the continual load that it sees as a result of having a set of guitar strings tuned up to pitch. Here's a guitar that was made by my company a long time ago. You can see the neck is covered in every surface with some composite material, either fiberglass, carbon fiber, and epoxy, or both. And this is what we would call an exoskeleton. So just like a cicada or a lobster, all the strength of the structure is right at the outside surface. And we don't really care so much about the material on the inside. It's nice if it's strong, but most of the loads are being taken by the skin of the structure.
Ken's probably the most accomplished guitar builder in the world today, I think. If you look at what he does, no one else can do it. No one else can conceive of it. We developed all the processes and machinery at Parker to build these, and the Parker Fly.
Ken's influence is palpable throughout the visual vernacular of the guitar today. Companies that you see willing to step outside of the traditional manufactured guitar shapes that we've become so familiar with, the Fly gave them the permission to step outside.
This instrument was made by me in 1986 in my grandfather's basement. This is a one-of-a-kind guitar. This guitar weighs 2.3 pounds. It's made of Douglas fir with a little bit of composite material. This was one of a series of developmental guitars. The thinking was that this was an archtop guitar without a body. In other words, a top without a back or side. So, composite material, which is man-made wood, you could think of it that way. Expensive, poisonous, man-made wood. And added to wood to kind of create a new species of wood that's more suitable for precise, predictable, and long-lived instrument making. Most people understand that a violin or an archtop guitar starts with a big piece of material, and then many cuts later, you end up with a thin piece of material that describes this beautiful three-dimensional convoluted shape that becomes the top or back of our instrument. It's a very labor-intensive process. In order to think that that's a good idea, to put all that work into this piece of wood that you could have just split into a couple of flat top parts, you have to feel like you're getting a better result, right? Why would you do all of that work if it wasn't coming out better? So Orville Gibson decided that putting the violin top building technology into mandolins and guitars and harp guitars was really going to make the instruments better. And he proceeded to do that. And I feel that he was dead on about that. And in fact, the idea of making a carved plate is inherently superior to a flat plate. Again, this is my opinion. Now, I think that one reason for that is that it means that the loads that the strings apply to the top are distributed throughout the top by the shape of the top and not by additional twigs of wood that are glued on. There's all these braces that go into flat top instruments. So the archtop guitar was always the point. And the only reason that I made anything except archtop guitars, which I fervently believe in and love, the only reason I did anything else is that in the late 70s, I just couldn't sell a guitar. The people didn't need them. Nobody wanted them. So by the time I was done with my decade at Parker Guitars, I wanted to come back to it. That's what I had always been hoping to do. When I was able to come back and do it, I studied all these manufacturing processes, got really good at making tooling, really was up to speed on how composites could conspire with wood to create extraordinary structures that both were reliable and also sounded fantastic. And that's how I was able to do the engineering work for this unique and I think exceptionally awesome neck joint. So this is how this works. This is a big carbon fiber pin that's an integral part of this molded neck. In the body, there's a socket or sleeve. And of course the neck goes in there. It's adjustable with this clever little device, which is a turnbuckle crossed with a set screw. So this has a left-handed thread on one end and a right-handed thread on the other end. So when you turn it, it either draws the threaded parts together or it spreads them apart. So here I've made the action of the guitar very high. And now I lower the action. And you can tell it's still in tune. And now I'll lower the action too much. So anyway, but you can still tell that the action changes, but the pitch does not change. So that's kind of cool. I don't think so much about whether it's going to sound traditional or innovative or whether it's going to be like a new color. I think of it more as getting out of the way of the way the string behaves and glamorizing and supporting the string's ability to move the structure. The string is the fundamental structure of all of this stuff. I mean, what is this? It's a stringed instrument. It's a chordophone, chord, string. So just the same way that a vehicle that rides on tires is designed from the tires up. It's the string that changes the energy of a person's body into sound energy. So I literally design the guitar to support a set of strings. So I know exactly what gauge string I want to have on the guitar, and there's a variety of reasons for that. You don't want it to be too light because then there's not enough mass to move things. And if it's too heavy, then it puts undue strain on people's connective tissue and injures people's bodies. So somewhere in the middle, I think the middle is a set of D'Addario 12 to 53 phosphor bronze strings. That's what I think. And that's what I've designed these guitars around. In 2005, my buddy TJ Thompson said, check these new D'Addario strings out. You're going to love them. He told me, and I quote, they say they last longer, but I don't care about that. They make my guitars sound better. I said, sounds like something I can work with. And quite literally, those strings are what I have used and recommended all these years. I just think they're, about the best things you could come up with those materials. And for this purpose, I just don't see how you could do a better job. 8 years ago, the Metropolitan Museum of Art received 2 of my guitars that are on permanent display there. It's pretty great. So I'm in there with Stradivarius and Amati products. They have one of my original pre-production Fly prototype guitars, and then they have an acoustic archtop guitar, not too different than this one. It's quite an honor. I'm really happy that it's there and people can have a look at what I've done.